Found my girlfriend cheating on me with my close friend. I have him arrested and ghosted her. Part 2. Fantastic. All I had to do was sit and wait. At this point, I wanted to make sure that my next plan was legal, and that I wouldn't be required to give Catherine any money or equity since I didn't know whether we were considered a de facto couple or not. As the single recipient of Rachel's inheritance, I didn't want to be left with any unpleasant surprises in which Catherine might take any portion of the fortune away from me. Shout out to those guys and gals there for putting me in touch with a great lawyer who assured me that because we hadn't been living together long enough to be classified as de facto, and because I was paying all the utilities on the property she was living in and didn't pay rent, she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. To be sure, he wrote out what I thought was a very solid legal document just in case there was any legal problem. The following week, my boss approached me and offered me a promotion to return to the city and run the team that I was a part of, which meant I wouldn't have to travel as much and be in one place as much, and that due to the success of being in my hometown, they were considering having 3 to 5 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as a part of my team. I said yes and started the process of starting my transfer, which would take around 6 weeks. Perfect. I had more than enough time to collect all of my proof. When I returned to my hometown the next week, I started to put the remainder of my plan into action. I requested Harry to allow 1 week of vacation for Catherine for the next 2 weeks. I planned to take her and a few of friends on a retreat before making the greatest choice of my life for the second time. He sprang up and gave me a big embrace, complimenting me for being brave enough to try again. I embraced him back, but not in the manner I believe he envisioned at the moment. He agreed and reserved the whole week for me. I requested him not to tell anybody since I wanted to keep it as a surprise as possible. I knew it would spread like wildfire across the workplace, but that was my intention. That night, I informed Catherine that I had booked her and 2 friends a week's stay at a tropical spa resort with all costs covered. No questions asked, she chooses 2 buddies and returns to the greatest surprise of her life. She yelled like a child who had just been informed that she could have all the chocolates in the store. I then told her that I was going to spend the following week in the city, preparing for a large client who was one of my biggest accounts and needed some people on my team to help before flying out the following week, and I wouldn't be home until the Monday she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her, but I told her it would be worth it when she returned. What I didn't tell her was that I'd opted to take a 2-week vacation to the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for that was going to explode the minute she set foot on the aircraft, and relishing my first taste of freedom. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday, I flew back and started driving home. When I arrived, I did a fast pass by my home and sure enough, Harry's vehicle was there. I parked a little farther back, like I had done the first night I had captured them, and checked the cameras. I'm fast asleep in my bed. To be honest, it was no surprise since I had often filmed them doing this over my 2-week absence. I immediately made my first call to the police, which was blocked by my caller ID. I told them that I was one of their neighbors and that I had seen someone hanging out in their car in the alley behind my house, occasionally passing something through windows to passing cars while also looking into my yard, and that I was concerned that they were dealing drugs, planning to break into someone's property. I provided them his license plate number and a description of him. They stated someone will be there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. I immediately contacted Catherine and told her I was about 10 minutes away and that I knew she was leaving the next day, but urgently wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the clip, I giggle at the noise I was shocked I didn't hear. Harry was half-dressed and dashing out the back door to his vehicle in a matter of seconds. I couldn't have wished for a more ideal scenario at that time. As Harry was driving away, one of the police vehicles turned the corner behind me, spotted Harry driving away quickly, and pursued him. She fell asleep again after pulling in, greeting a happy Catherine and performing the couple of things. I, on the other hand, couldn't get a wink of sleep. Her and her companions were packed into a vehicle the following day. I had to wait a few hours after they drove gone before I could start carrying out my plan. I phoned a removalist acquaintance and apologized for the late notice, but I wanted my home packed and relocated on Friday. After we agreed on a time, I informed him that he would need to transport some boxes to a storage facility, which he said would not be a problem. Then I started packing Catherine's things. Later that day, I received a call from the police asking me to come and identify some goods that had been captured from a suspect the night before and matched the description of the items I had reported stolen. I smiled to myself, pleased that my plan for Harry had come to reality, and answered that I will be there immediately to pick it up. Of course, when I arrived, some of the goods were still missing, owing to the fact that they had to be at his home and they hadn't checked there yet. The town was bustling with news at this point. My hometown's events don't remain hidden for long. Harry was shamed and swiftly dismissed for his possession of narcotics and stolen goods, and our respective supervisors had tendered a formal apology to me on behalf of the firm earlier in the week. That night, I went to my parents' home and informed both my and Rachel's parents what had occurred, omitting important specifics, and that I was going back to the city after getting promoted, but Catherine wouldn't be there. They were unhappy at first because I hadn't told them what was going on, but they were relieved that I was handling things maturely and hadn't gone to their level, even if they didn't agree with ghosting Catherine. But I went home after a few beers, laughter, and tears. After a hectic week of coordinating cleaners for the next week, real estate to put my property on the rental market, and numerous other responsibilities at my hometown's office, I packed some items into my vehicle and traveled to my parents' house, where I bid farewell before the journey. I went to Becky's residence before leaving. Becky had been one of Rachel's closest pals since she was a child. She was the only other person who knew what was going on, sans the information about Harry. I couldn't have organized things as fast as I did without her assistance. I handed Becky a thick manila folder with all of my proof of her infidelity, as well as a letter and a few other legal paperwork from my attorney indicating that she was ordered not to contact me, and instructions on how to get her items at the storage facility I had leased out. I said my goodbyes and traveled back to the city. I awoke on Sunday to multiple missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. Catherine had returned home early after being warned to something going on in town, only to discover an empty house with a for rent sign out front. She had gone to my parents' house, freaked out, and they had locked the door on her the instant she responded, causing her to ring everyone until she was reached by Becky and informed that she had a package for her. I was informed she didn't take well to that, which I already knew based on her several furious emails and phone calls accusing me of setting up Harry, being deceptive, and so forth. I was afraid she'd show up at my front door, but nothing happened. I'm writing this for you, dear reader, 5 weeks after I left and was promoted. Granted, it's lengthy, and it took a few rewrites to get it down from my original 14 pages, which is nearly twice the length of this narrative. But I believe that most of what I stated was relevant enough for the story. Update. So one of the topics I'm often asked is what happened to Harry, why I was so harsh on him, and why I would implicate myself, particularly on the internet. After speaking with some friends back home, the simple answer is that Harry is facing a few months in jail since it's his first offense, but he might get out sooner, and I thought that it was vital to the plot. No one knew what I had planned for Harry, which is why I deleted a few important facts that may have genuinely identified me, as well as changed up some of the descriptive language about locales to possibly place this narrative anywhere in the globe. To clarify, there was already more than enough proof in his own house. I only offered a mechanism for the authorities to further examine his conduct in his own home. That being said, I don't regret what I did to him since he grew up with both Rachel and me and saw how difficult it was for me to pick up my life after she died. For anyone wondering whether I'm afraid about Harry finding out and reporting me to the authorities, I know he doesn't use Reddit. I know Catherine has an account, but I haven't noticed any recent activity to indicate that she hasn't been online in a while. Who knows about other Reddit users? Most of the people I'm friends with on my primary account could recognize this tale if they come across it, but I don't know about their surfing habits outside of the subreddits that we visit. People have asked why I didn't do more for Catherine or why I stayed around for as long as I did. I nearly sent her out after a few days, but I wanted to collect evidence and exhibit proof of her infidelity so that everyone she knew understood what she had done. She is a major socialite, in her words, and I knew that exposing her would ruin her reputation. In terms of what happened to her, I've been informed that she recently relocated to another state after getting transferred. According to the folks I've talked with today, she was mostly assigned administrative responsibilities prior to her transfer, since there was quite a bit of pushback once the rumor mill spread across town. People have questioned the legality of what I did to her, such as transferring all of her belongings, sending her and several friends away, spending a significant amount of money on the trip, and so on. Morally, I think it's a bad move to build up her expectations of what she imagined would happen. This, along with destroying her reputation in town, was my ultimate goal: to give her a taste of what it felt like to have everything come apart around you. But from a legal standpoint, I was perfectly justified. She had never updated any of her personal information, driver's license, voting registration, etc., to reflect that she had moved into my home throughout the period she had been living with me. After speaking with, I discovered this information over the course of my preparation with my lawyer. I was allowed to accomplish what I did since there was no real evidence on paper that she was dwelling there, and because we hadn't fulfilled the de facto status. Finally, for those of you who claim that my narrative is fabricated, that I am a karma, a sociopath, in this day and age, who doesn't have some sociopathic tendencies, and that my malicious compliance tale is also evidence, I will be honest and say that I will not attempt to alter your thoughts on this. Everyone has the right to an opinion on tales published on Reddit, as well as an opinion on people who share them. The plot on the other subreddit, on the other hand, was to gain karma, since my first post on needed me to build up enough before they would allow me to post because they suspected I was a bot. That narrative, which I just trimmed in the gist of the discussion since I can't recall everything, did in fact happen and received national attention soon after. If I ever locate the story, I'll provide a link to it since it was, or was close to being, one of the highest roaming costs our firm had ever passed on to a client.